I'm Link from GoDigitalSA Foundation, and I'm your instructor for this course. So we're on Unit 3 now, Variables. So Lesson A, Variables in Daily Life. What we'll learn, the difference between variables and constants, and 5 types of variables that we find in Make code. So let's talk variables and constants. A variable is information with values that may change during a program. So we can say that the team is home. In this case, we've got a scoreboard. So we could say that the team is home, or this team is away. And we could say we've got a variable called score, where the score is 25, or the score is 37. So the variable name might be team, or the variable name could be another variable, could be score. There are different types of variables depending on the kind of information they hold. In Make code, the type of variable is assigned the first time you use the variable. From then on, you can only change the variable value to another value of the same type. And we'll explain that just now. In constants, it's like a variable, but with values that don't change. In mathematics, we've got things like pi. Pi is a constant that is equal to 3.14, approximately. And there's other constants. So in programming, we can have a named value that does not change for the entire program. So that's a constant. So types of variables. Okay, we can have lots of different types of variables. In Make code, these are the types that we've got. We've got a number, which holds numeric values. String, which holds a string of alphanumeric characters. And alphanumeric normally means alphabetic characters, letters A to Z, uppercase or lowercase. Numeric characters, which are 0 to 9. And it also includes punctuation marks and symbols. So $, full stop, exclamation mark, and so on. Those are all characters that you can put into a string. Boolean, this has only 2 possible values, true or false. And very often we'll also see it shown as yes or no, or 0 or 1. A sprite, it's a special variable that holds 2 values for the row and column to represent the location of a dot on the microbit screen. And array is a special variable that holds a list of multiple items. Okay, so here we've got an example of code in Make code where we say on start we want to set these variables to values. So we've got a variable called number variable. We've given it this name and we're setting it to 29. We've got a variable that we called string variable and we're setting it to hello. We've got a variable named Boolean variable and we're setting it to true. We've got a variable called sprite variable and we're setting it to create a sprite at x2, y2. Okay, so that means that this sprite variable is currently set to the LED at x is 2 and y is 2. And here we've got a variable named list, which we're setting to an array of red, orange, and yellow. So the value of list is the set of red, orange, and yellow. Okay, and we'll see as time goes on what all of this means. So understanding variables. Let's play rock, paper, scissors with a partner. And we want to keep a score on a piece of paper and identify the variables and constants on the score sheet. Okay, do you know the game rock, paper, scissors, where you have 2 people and they make a hand signal? And it could be paper, which looks like this, or it could be rock like that, or it could be scissors like that. So the 2 people put out their hands, one showing one symbol, the other one showing one symbol. If they both do the same symbol, then it's a tie. If one does paper and the other one does rock, paper covers rock, so the one who did the paper wins. If one did rock and the other one did scissors, then rock breaks scissors, so the one who did rock wins. And if one did scissors and the other one did paper, then because scissors cut paper, the one who did scissors wins. Okay, so we want variables. Well, we could say it's the score of person A, and it's the score of person B, and we could also keep track of the number of ties. Okay, so when you're playing a game, we'll have game 1, and as and we got two people, Mary and Doug. So Mary wins a game, Doug wins a game, and they both tie. We keep their scores by making tick marks here. And it's only when one person has more wins than the other that the game is finished and that person wins. So here, Doug ended up with 5 wins. Mary had 4 wins, so Doug wins game 1. And here we've got game 2, where Mary got 6. There were 4 ties, and Doug got 4, so here Mary wins. So the variables are Mary's score, Doug's score, and the number of ties. So that's all there is to constants and variables. So we learned about constants and variables in real life and in programming, and we learned about the 5 types of variables when coding the microbit. So in lesson B, we're going to code the microbit as a game scorekeeper, and then we'll take a quiz. So lesson B, make a game scorekeeper. And what we'll learn, we want to code with string and number variables. We want to assign meaningful values, meaningful names to the variables. We want to use math operations with variables, and then we want to see how much we've already learned. So to code a game scorekeeper with variables, we're going to create and name the variables. We're going to initialize the variable values. We'll update the variable values as people win games. We'll add user feedback, and we'll show the final values, and we can add on with some math operations. So we'll see what all of that means just now. Okay, so we're going to create 3 variables. From the variables toolbox drawer, we're going to click on the Make a Variable button. And we'll name the variables player A wins, player B wins, and players tie. So we'll go to the toolbox, we'll go down to variables, click on that, then we'll click on Make a Variable. We'll give it a name, player A wins, and we click on OK. Then we click on Make a Variable, type in player B wins, and click on OK. Then we click on Make a Variable, and players tie, and click on OK. Next, we have to give the variables starting values of 0. So from the variables toolbox drawer, we drag out 3 set variable blocks onto the workspace and drop them into the onStart block. And we use the drop-down menus to select the 3 variables. Okay, so we want on start, we want to set players tie to 0, player B wins to 0, and player A wins to 0. Now we want to add to the scores. To add to the score, when you press a button from the input toolbox drawer, we drag out 3 on button pressed blocks onto the workspace, and using the drop-down menus, we select button B, button A plus B. Okay, so in the toolbox, we go to Input, and we're going to select the On button pressed block. And we select button A, then button B, then button A plus B. And then we have to change the variables values to add to the score. So from the variable toolbox drawer, we drag out the 3 change variable blocks onto the workspace and drop into each of the On button pressed blocks. Using the drop-down menus, we select each of the 3 variable names. Okay, so the variables, we're going to change player A wins by 1 when button A is pressed. When button B is pressed, we change player B wins by 1. And when A and B buttons are pressed at the same time, then we change players tie by 1. We also need to see which button changes what variable. So from the basic toolbox drawer, we drag out 3 show LEDs blocks onto the workspace and drop into each of the on button press blocks. And we draw an A, a B, and a T on the screen. So we show LEDs A when the button A is pressed. We show LEDs B when button B is pressed. And we show LEDs T when A and B are pressed at the same time. And after that, we clear the screen after showing A, B, or T. To display the final values of each variable, from the input toolbox drawer, we drag out an on-shake block onto the workspace. So when the user shakes the microbit, we want to display who wins. So we show the letter A and we show the value, we show number, player A wins, so that's the value of that variable, and then we wait for a second. Then we show a letter B, we show the value of player B wins, and we wait for a second. Then we show ties, and we show the number players tie, the value of players tie, and then we wait for 1 second, and then we clear the screen. Okay, so let's open a browser and start coding. Okay, so here I've got my browser. I've gone to makecode.microbit.org. I'm going to go down to my projects. We see the old projects we did in units 1 and 2, but we're going to create a new project. So we click on new project. We have to give the project a name. We're going to call it Scorekeeper. And click on create. Okay, so we should have written down our algorithm or our pseudocode, and we should follow what we've written down now. So basically on start, we want to clear our variables. So we first have to create the variables. So we're going to go to our toolbox. We're going to variables. We're going to make a variable, and we'll call the first variable player A wins. Click on OK. We're going to create a second variable, player B wins. Click on OK. And make a third variable, players tie. Okay, players tie, and click on OK. So we've created 3 variables, player A wins, player B wins, and players tie. Note that we haven't said what type of variables these are. The type of variable gets set the first time you set a variable to a value. So let's see how that's going to work. We said that on start, we want to set each of these variables to the number 0. Okay, so we go to variables. I'm going to take the set block, put it into on start, and you can see it says players tie, so we're going to set players tie to 0. I can go back to variables, take the set block again, and now I change the variable name to player A wins. So this will set player A wins to 0. Okay, I can go back to variables block and do the same thing again, but let's just try something different. I'm going to right click on this block and click on duplicate. That creates a duplicate of that block. It's gray because it's sitting on the design surface, which it can't be. So I'm going to put it into the on start block. And now I change the variable to player B wins. Okay, so when the microbit starts up, it sets players tie to 0. It sets player A wins to 0, and it sets player B wins to 0. Okay, this forever block is in the way, but actually we're not going to use it for this program. So I'm going to throw it away. So what's the next thing we want to do? Well, we said that whenever we click on button A, then it needs to add 1 to players tie. So let's go over here. We're looking for an input on button A pressed. I'll put it over here. So when button A is pressed, we want to add 1 to the variable players tie. So I go down to variables, and it's change players tie by 1. Put that over here. So on button A is pressed, we want to change this to player A wins. So change player A wins by 1 means that it's going to add 1 to player A wins. And remember that when we started, player A wins was set to 0. So the first time you press the button, it will become 1. Next time you press the button, it will become 2, and so on. Okay, we also want to show which button was pressed. That's feedback to the user. So I'm going to go to Basic and Show LEDs. And over here, we want to show the letter A. So I'm going to draw a letter A. Okay, if you make a mistake, you can just click on the LED you want to erase. Okay, so when button A is pressed, it will change the variable player A wins by 1, so it adds 1 to it, and then it shows the letter A, and then we want to clear the screen. So I go back to basic, and I take a clear screen block and I put it here. Okay, and we want to do exactly the same thing for button B being pressed. Now I want to show you the easy way to do this. If we've got a lot of blocks inside a block, we can copy everything by clicking on the block that contains all of them. Click on duplicate, and it creates a duplicate of all these things. Now it's gray because you cannot have two on button A pressed, but we're going to change this to button B. And now it's fine again. So when button B is pressed, we want to change player B wins. So I'm going to change this to the variable player B wins, and player B wins by 1. We need to show the letter B, so I'm going to change this to a B. Okay, that looks like a B, and we clear the screen. Okay, and finally, we want to do very much the same thing again, so we can duplicate this. Once again, it's grayed out because we can't have two on button B pressed, but I'm changing this to A plus B. Okay, so now if the user presses the A button and the B button at the same time, we want to change player's tie by 1. So we add 1 to the variable player's tie, and we need to display the letter T. Okay, so now when we press both buttons at the same time, it changes the tie variable by 1, and then it shows the letter T, and then it clears the screen. Okay, I'll zoom out so we can see the whole thing. Okay, so let's see what happens. Well, our simulator is running. The variables have all been set to 0. If player A wins the first round, displays A, so it just flashes the letter A. We can't see the variable, but the variable should have been increased by 1. Now I press the letter B, the button B. So now it displays the letter B. We don't see anything else. It has cleared the screen. Okay, and if A and B are pressed at the same time, it shows the letter T, and it should have increased the variable T. Okay, now we can't see what those variables are. So we need to add something that will show us the values of the variables. So what we'll do is that when we shake the microbit, it should show us the total scores. So we go back to the toolbox, we go to the input. We've got on shake here. I'm going to take the on shake, I'm going to put it here. Let's zoom in so we can see what we're doing. Okay, so on shake, we want to display all the scores. So we want to show all the scores. So we want to show the score for player A. Now, instead of creating this again, I'm just going to duplicate it, and there's two reasons for duplicating it. One is that it's easier than having to create it again. But the second one is that we know that we want it to be exactly this. So by duplicating it, we're also making sure that it is exactly the same. So I click on duplicate, I drag it out, to the on shake. So it will show the letter A. Then it needs to show the value of the variable. So I'm going to say show number. The number I want to show is the value of variable A. So I go back to variables, player A wins, and I put it in there. So it's going to show the value of player A wins. Now, before I show the value of player B, we need to pause for a bit. So I'll go back here. I'll pause for 1 second. We want to pause for 1 second, which is 1,000 milliseconds. Now we can show the score for player B. And again, I'm going to copy this to make sure that it's exactly the same one. I duplicate it, drag it out there. Then I want to show the number for variable B, player B wins. And then I pause for 1 second. And then I show the number of ties. So again, I copy, I duplicate this block, put it over here. I show the value, the number, the value of the variable player's tie. I pause for a second. And finally, I clear the screen. Okay, because you don't want to leave things on the screen after you've finished seeing them. Okay, now whenever you change a program, the program starts from the beginning. So it won't remember the scores anymore. We've started from the beginning. So now, let's say player A wins the first time. So we click on A, and that variable has been increased by 1. Player B wins the next one, so we click on player B. Then they tie, so we press both buttons A and B. They tie again, so we press both buttons A and B. Okay, and then the next time, player B wins. So we click on B. Okay, so how do we check the score? We need to shake the microbit. And again, the simulator, we can't shake it, but it's got a virtual button here. So if we click this, it's like shaking the microbit. So I click on that, then it displays A is 1, and waits for a second. B is 2, waits for a second, and T ties are 2. Oops, okay. And here's a bug. I've made a bug in my code. I said I was going to clear the screen when I'm done, but I've dragged the wrong block there. So I'll get rid of the wrong block, go back here, and take clear screen and put it there. Okay, so I've fixed my bug. And once again, remember, if I shake this, everything is 0. Because when you change the program, it resets the program back to the beginning. So now I've got to click on A if A wins, click on B if B wins, click both A and B if it's a tie, both A and B if it's a tie. If A wins the next one, then A, and then we shake it for the total score. And A is 2, B is 1, and ties are 2. Okay, let's leave it at that. Let's save our program. We click on the Save button. Okay, that saves the file to our local computer. And then we can click on Home, and you'll see we've got Scorekeeper here, so we can always go back to it later. Okay, let's go back to the slides. And let's do a quiz. Okay, so what's the difference between a constant and a variable? A constant has a value that doesn't change, and a variable has a value that may change. It doesn't have to change, but it can change, whereas a constant will never change. Name 2 variables that can affect how you dress to go outside. Okay, there's lots of answers to that, but it could be the weather, the temperature, what clothes you have that are clean, is it the holiday season, the time of day, formality of the event, and so on. There's lots of different variables that would affect how you dress when you go outside. What's an example of each of the following types of variables? Number. Okay, numerical data can be the year, the temperature, the degree of acceleration. So it can be numbers like 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It can be numbers like 1.6 and 2.8 can be negative numbers like -3 or -5.6 and so on. Strings, a string of alphanumeric characters, a person's name, a password, the day of the week. Okay, and remember that alphanumeric characters also include symbols and punctuation. So exclamation mark or a plus or minus and so on. And Booleans can only have two values, either true or false, which can also be represented by 0 or 1. And it can be also shown as no or yes. So it's two values. Why is it important to name variables in a clear and meaningful way? Variable names should clearly describe what type of information they hold, so they are easily recognizable in the program and you can find problems or bugs more easily. Okay, when you go back to that program, you want to understand what it is doing, so you need to have variable names that make sense. True or false, you can only use the default variable names provided in the variables toolbox drawer. Okay, false, you can make a variable with any name you want or need for a program with the make a variable button. Okay, you should always use your own names for the variables. Don't simply accept the names that it creates when you create a variable. Okay, so write the pseudocode in words to describe what these coding blocks do. Okay, so on start, set player A wins to 0, set player B wins to 0, and set ties to 0. So your pseudocode, which you should have written before you create the program, it's something similar to this. At the start of the program, the variables for player A wins, player B wins, and player's tie all are set to 0. Write the pseudocode in words to describe what these coding blocks do. So on shake, show string, total rounds played, and show number, player A wins, player B wins, plus player's tie. Okay, we didn't do this. Let's just quickly go back and try this. We want to show the total number of rounds played, and we want to add the values together. So we're going to do some arithmetic here. We didn't do that before. So let's go back. We'll open up our program again. We'll go to the on shake. It showed the individual scores. So now we want to show total. So let's go to basic. And okay, they showed a string. So we might as well show a string. So I'm going to say show string. Okay, so before we clear the screen, after the pause, we're going to show a string that's going to be total games played. Okay, what is the total games played? Well, it's a number, so we're going to show a number. And we need to do some math here. So let's go down to math. And we've got a math block here. It's one number plus another number. I'm going to take this and put it in show number. So we want to show the number of games player A1 plus the number of games of player B1 plus the number of games that were tied. Okay, so I can go to variables, player A wins, put it in here. Oops. Okay, this can be a little bit tricky at times. Okay, so player A wins plus, and then the next one, we can't put in player B wins because we also need player's tie. So I'm going to take another math block, adding two numbers together, and I'm going to put it in there. So it's player A wins plus two other numbers added together. So back to variables, player B wins, and another variable, player's tie. Make it a bit smaller. So this is going to show the number player A wins plus player B wins plus player's tie. And again, let's pause after that. So we'll pause for 1 second. Okay, pause for 1 second. Okay, then we clear the screen. Okay, so let's just test this out now. Player A wins, so I click on button A. Player B wins. Click on button B. The players tie. Click on A plus B. And then player A wins the next round. Okay, so now when we shake it, you remember it's going to show the three values. And it shows total games played. Since we changed the program, I'm going to save it again. And we'll go back to home. Okay. Okay, so we needed to write the pseudocode in words to describe what these coding blocks do. So it's something like this. When you shake the microbit, the lights will display total rounds played and the number value that totals the number of wins for player A plus the number of wins for player B plus the number of ties. So it's player A wins plus player B wins plus players tie, all added together. So what we learned today, we coded a game scorekeeper with strings and number variables and math operations. And we saw the importance of assigning meaningful names to variables. So for the project, we're going to create and encode a microbit program that counts something. Okay, so lesson C, this is a project that you may do at home if you like. The Everything Counts project. What we'll learn, we code a microbit program that counts something, design and build a gadget that uses the microbit. So project expectations, think of a gadget that counts something. Create a program to keep track of inputs with at least 3 variables. Use unique variable names that clearly describe the information values the variable hold. Provide output in some visual and useful way. And use math operations to add, subtract, multiply, and or divide at least 2 variables to give a useful output. So what we learned, we coded a microbit program that counts something, and we designed and built a gadget that uses the microbit. Next time in Unit 4, we'll be looking at conditionals. That's it for today. I'll see you next time.